All right, YouTube, it's time to talk about fiscal matters. Trump has just proposed as a primary sort of budget proposal. And mostly it seems good to me because it massively cuts basically everything other than military and homeland security across the board. Now, I disagree with that. I'd keep military spending at the current level and freeze it for a while. Discretionary spending, a lot of that, it's, if he ends the no-bid contract sort of crap with the military can take its current budget and stretch it way, way further. It's just like healthcare. If you get more competition in competitive drug pricing, the actual cost drops. So even if you're not paying more for those programs and paying less per capita over time, potentially as the population grows, it evens itself out and you actually save a huge amount. So I'm not sure that additional spending is really necessary, even though the upping of the amount is actually, I believe, considerably lower than a lot of Republicans would have wanted. So, that's okay. It's outweighed significantly by other cuts. But we're going to go through and play a game of, have you even heard of this fucking agency? Have you even heard of this friggin' program? Because there are some funny things in here. Of course, it's an archived link in the description because I think it's coming from, what site's this? I didn't want to use the New York Times, so I used CNBC. They're a little bit better, generally speaking. Let's see. Community Development Block Grants, the Weatherization Assistance Program, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Those will be done away with completely, 100% reduction. They won't exist anymore. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting has done good work in the past, but it's become politicized. And if it hadn't, I don't think that this would be proposed. And he'll probably end up negotiating on this, figuring out a way to make it, so it's not being politicized. If that's the fact, yeah, that's it. I mean, doesn't Arthur, go through that? Fuck, that's a classic. You have to keep Arthur, I suppose. I'm sort of half joking there. The Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program is one that my state is going to really, really not want to be cut. Because for those of you who live in the more temperate parts of the United States, this may not be particularly important, maybe. But for those of us in northern New England, there are a lot of old people here on pensions who really do need that program. That's probably the one thing here that I personally would prefer not to see done away with. I would prefer it to be restructured and reformed in some way. Maybe not the most major issue. Of course, the states could take care of that themselves, return, instead of the federal government handling this, why don't the states handle a lot of these? Also proposed for elimination are lesser-known bureaucracies. Good. Get rid of them all. Like the McGovern-Dole International Food for Education Program. Have you heard of it? I haven't. I don't know what it does, and I probably wouldn't care if I did. The Endocrine Disruptor Screening Program. Yeah, our country will fall apart without that one, I'm sure. And the Inter-American Foundation, again. What does it do? I don't know. Does it, the last year, what was their actual budget? Did they get $10 million to send 10 people down to Mexico for a weekend or something to learn Spanglish? I don't know. Who knows? We've got so much bureaucracy in this country, nobody even knows what half of these groups do. And this is why I generally support this concept. He's also talking about massive cuts to things like the EPA, the Department of Education. Good. I would eliminate them altogether. I'd get rid of the Department of Education, let the states handle education like they did back when our educational attainment ranking was far higher than it has been since we switched to a federalized educational system. The truth is that states are better able to educate students. There will always be those who lack a bit. There will always be those who lag behind. If you're developing a ranking system at all, and you've got states at all, there will always be somebody near the bottom of the heap. The federal government can address that without taking over education altogether. The EPA hasn't done anything meaningful in decades. The EPA is not responsible for the fact that our country has been cleaned up. It was Richard Nixon's Clean Air Act, partially administered through the EPA, that helped. That and the decline of U.S. industry, which had nothing whatsoever to do with bureaucracy directly. It had to do with a burdensome tax rate. Now, for those that are worried, they say, oh, well, this program's being axed, that program's being axed. Salaries for federal workers will fall. Good. That's all good. That's what people have been talking about for a while. Everybody in the Republican Party, these neocons saying, oh, we won't support this budget proposal, it's too draconian or something. You're the ones who have been arguing for decades about the need to shrink federal spending. And you're finally offered a budget that will actually shrink federal spending, and you stonewall on it because it happens to be Donald Trump putting it forth? This is the best thing that you've got, and you've got the House and the Senate. You control both. You have the ability to finally pass a comprehensive budget that axes some of the needless bureaucracy in this country, shrinks the rest, and hopefully restores state sovereignty over some programs that do need to be administered. You have finally the ability to do this, and you don't want to support it? None of you, anybody standing in the way of this style of budget, you can negotiate and haggle over the specific things to be axed. But the fundamental principle is perfect. It is exactly what you have argued for since the 1980s. That's exactly what the Republicans have wanted. Now they finally are in a position to get it, and they're going to ignore it. And to say, no, because this agency, oh, that's a sacred cow for the people of my state. Oh, I can't support it. Oh, I might not get reelected. Do you stand for nothing? Stop being a friggin' coward and go ahead and support the basic premise, and then go talk to Trump and then tell him your grievances and see if there's a workaround. I would cut it even more. If I were in that position, I would cut it even more, and I would lock the legislature in their chambers until something akin to it passes. I would have the sergeant-at-arms lock the doors behind him and say, you're not getting vacations until some sort of budget is passed. There will be no shutdown. There will be no There will be no filibustering. You'll invoke the nuclear option if you know what's good for you, because otherwise I'll campaign against all of you. And you'll be the ones that lose. You're the ones that the American people hate way worse than the executive branch. I would weigh it over their heads and use the bully pulpit every day. I'd come out, I'd address the whole population. I'd say, this is a good budget. If you like these programs, pressure your state to re-administer them on the state level. Other states may not need them. There are some states that don't really need that energy assistance. There are some states that they don't really make use of the endowment for the arts as much. Federal level programs of this kind are inefficient. They are overburdensome. They're an overreach of everything the government is supposed to be. The government's not supposed to be administering these things. This is a new concept within American government. This is a European concept going back centuries. It's what we fought to get away from in the first place. So I generally support the premise, except that unless this needs to be combined with two things to really work. It certainly will shrink spending. That's a great start. That's your deficit goes down. Woohoo! That's wonderful compared to what we've suffered under W and Obama. That's great. That's a great first step, but it's just a first step. You also need tax reform. People are paying too much in taxes. Federal tax rate should drop significantly. Reform the tax code. Large corporations should not get away with murder and pay a 5% tax rate. They should pay the same rate as a small business or an entrepreneur, and the overall rate should be dropped. You'll still be taking in more money, but it will actually give a significant easement to people like myself who are self-employed as well as small brick-and-mortar businesses. They'll do fine. They'll boom all over the country. You'll get more entrepreneurs, more people will work, self-employed side jobs maybe as well. They'll work for themselves, will be their own master for a change. Small businesses will be able to grow into regional businesses more often. They will be able to compete with larger chains more ably. Communities will not be torn apart by multinational corporations. That's great. You need to reform the tax code, and you need to give urgent relief to the middle class especially, which has been shrinking now for a decade. They need relief. Second to that, you need more competition where you do have federal spending. That means within the military, no more no-bid contracts there. Within intelligence, the same thing. That means within pharmaceutical companies and healthcare in general, you need more competition. If that goes across national borders, so be it. If it saves money and still gets the job accomplished, so be it, as long as you're not, harming national security. And I would shrink a lot of these things further. The intelligence agencies, I'd strip them of their domestic surveillance power. Trump should look into that. Since he's going to hardball the CIA and the FBI and the DHS and all these groups, why doesn't he rescind their ability to conduct mass surveillance? Or have they already convinced him that that function is somehow both constitutional and necessary, despite the former head of the CIA saying, it's really neither. Yeah, it's not lawful, it doesn't accomplish anything, we're just spending tens of billions of dollars for basically nothing. That's what we need to do, but this is a good first step. And when I hear Republicans, of all people, complaining that it's too draconian in its cuts, you've been talking. You talked for years and years when Obama was in office about the need to stimulate the economy by lowering taxes at least a little, especially on the middle class and entrepreneurs and small businesses, which was your perennial line for over a decade. And you've spoken of needing to shrink the federal budget. You're being handed that on a golden platter while you control the House and the Senate, and you're threatening to oppose it. You sound like dumbasses. Leave it to people like John McCain to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, when they're literally being given that which they have sought for so long. For 2 generations, they've sought after this. And now they're gonna thumb their nose at it, I suppose. You're crazy. You're also going to collapse your chances of actually carrying the midterms. Now, I've already spoken about what that means in an electoral sense. It might not even be the worst outcome for the right wing. But I would assume you want to continue at least having that extra seat in the Senate so you can get things passed. What's the point? You're arguing against a budget that does everything the Republicans have argued for, short of making Jesus the official mascot of the United States. Is that what you're waiting for? You're waiting for someone to inject gay marriage back into it so you can shoot yourselves in the foot again? Is that what the Republican Party wants to stand for? This is why a lot of people, they voted for Trump. They're not Republicans, myself included. I could never be a Republican under the ethos that's been used by the Republican Party for so long. Now you're even handed your budget. It actually looks pretty good. It's working. It's capable of being implemented. You can cut some of this bureaucratic waste, and you're not going to support it. That's nuts. It's counterproductive to your electoral chances in the midterms. It's counterproductive to standing for anything, since a lot of your fans would love to support such a budget. Oh, but they're cutting the National Endowment for the Arts. Ooh, we need to prop up more museums. Why? Exactly why? It's a form of social engineering to think that sort of thing is even necessary. You can bicker all day over whether it is, it's aesthetic, it's educational. Okay, yeah, that's fine, but is it worth the cost? Is the benefit to mankind outweighed on the cost? You can have that. There's no objective answer. You've got to determine that for yourself. If that's what you have a stick up your ass about, why don't you bring it up as this budget is getting further hammered out? This isn't some final form budget, as in smash or pass Trump's budget. This is my suggestion for what the budget should be. Now it gets sent to committee. So why don't you bicker there, instead of immediately deciding that you could never support such a thing because it's too draconian, it cuts too much. You've been talking about wanting to cut even more than this, arguably, for a decade now. We've got too much debt. The deficit's too high. We need to cut spending because it's the government's fault, said the Republicans, all the while that Obama was president. Here comes Trump. Yeah, you're right. Here, we'll cut spending. Oh no, Nazi! Adolf Hitler incarnate for wanting to cut too much spending. There's some morons in the Republican Party. This is another reason why I don't delve into partisan politics. It makes them look at least as dumb as the Democrats have been. They get handed a mandate. First 2 years of Obama's presidency. He can close Gitmo. He can get us out of the Middle East. He can, scale back. He can reform the corporate tax code to take care of the deficit. He does none of it. He sits around and beats off in Hawaii while he's golfing for 2 years. He does nothing. Now Trump takes the reins. He's actually willing to do something. He's showing astonishing fortitude in that role by designing a loose federal budget and putting it before them in the first place. And what do the Republicans in Congress do? Oh, now we don't want to work. We want to go golfing for the next 2 years. We want to shoot ourselves in the foot as a party because Paul Ryan said it was a good idea, because Bitch McConnell and John McLean think that this budget is bad. Boo-hoo-hoo. Too much federal waste cutting. It's crazy. Now, I generally support it. I would freeze rather than increase the military and defense budgets. Domestic surveillance and so forth. I'd eliminate that altogether. I'd slash more agencies than this. And I'd give even more draconian cuts to the ones that still stay there. The DEA would certainly not have a budget. They would be out. They wouldn't exist anymore. The DHS would be rolled up with some other organization, consolidate them together and lower the collective budget some, consolidate their purpose where they overlap. It'd be more efficient. It'd be less burdensome. There'd be less regulation. That's a big part of the cost of running a business now, is hiring all the lawyers and accountants to navigate all the bureaucracy. It's not even just the tax rate alone. Even if you do get that down, you still have to pay through the nose to other private firms to get you that lower rate. You're not saving anything. That's the problem. Too much bureaucracy. And Trump wants to cut a bunch of it. Hell, he's not cutting nearly enough, in my opinion. I'd cut so much more. I wouldn't take a butcher knife to it. I'd take a chainsaw to it. That's what our country needs. We need to slash and burn most of the bureaucracy out of existence altogether and return government to its proper form, which is administering the bare rudiments necessary for the rest of society to do the rest in a private manner. No, we don't want poor people languishing on the streets, but guess what? All this bureaucracy, it doesn't keep them from doing that. There are still homeless people. There are still impoverished people. There are still people with malnutrition in this country. There are people who can't afford things. And that exists despite literally hundreds of billions of dollars of discretionary spending that's supposed to be helping these people. They say the answer is more bureaucracy. I say the answer is eliminating bureaucracy altogether. That's about all. Peace out.